himself. Joining us now is Congressman Ed Royce. He's the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for being with us. It's been nearly a year since the Iraqi military was driven out of Mosul, the second biggest city in Iraq, and nearly a year later we see the Iraqi military once again fleeing a key Iraqi city, Ramadi. At this point, is this an organization, the Iraqi military, that the U.S. can and should have faith in?
Well, there were a lot of questions here, and one of them was that there weren't that many Iraqi military units in the town. A lot of the fighting was actually done by Sunni tribes. And one of the most horrific aspects of this, of course, is as these ISIS fighters went through the town, they massacred children, wives of the townspeople. This is sort of the mark they leave when you resist ISIS. And so the fact that the military in ISIS did not the military in Iraq did not supply, sufficient units there to defend that town is a big problem. Secondarily, if we'd used our air power earlier, when ISIS first came out of Syria, in order to suppress ISIS as it moved town by town, those long convoys. Of course, that was not done for the first 9 months. And even now, it's relatively tepid. We don't have forward observers stationed to be able to call in those airstrikes to really be effective. You need to use your advantage in special operations, in human intelligence gathering, and in air power. And so that's another aspect of this where we really need to pick it up.
But, Mr. Chairman, a large part of the U.S. strategy against ISIS in Iraq right now is, to John's point, is training and assisting Iraqi forces. Do you have faith that Iraqi forces, even with U.S. support, can handle this?
Well, I can tell you what did happen on the ground, and that is that the Iraqi forces that were there put up resistance. They did carry out a battle, and certainly the tribesmen, the Sunni tribesmen, stood their ground. What is hard for us to get our arms around is the fact that these ISIS fighters came there to die. And when they're going to Anbar province or Syria with the intention of being suicide bombers and driving those bulldozers laden with explosives and then sacrificing themselves and hurling themselves against the front lines, this is going to be a really tough slog in terms of what we've got to do to not only train these soldiers to get them to stand their ground, but also to give them the kind of air support they need. And some of that is going to have to be special operations calling in, as I said, some fire close enough to the battle line where you can hit the targets, hit the ISIS targets, and really give them the type of support that is necessary. The other aspect of this, go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just going to say, so what's happened in Ramadi, I think you can't sugarcoat it, is a devastating setback for the Iraqi government. But there has been some success over the last week in the struggle against ISIS, specifically with the special forces that you were just noting right there. There was a Delta Force raid, in the eastern part of Syria that apprehended Abu Sayyaf, this man who was known to help run the oil and gas operations of ISIS. His wife has now been in custody for several days. What can you tell us about what U.S. intelligence has learned from the wife or learned from the data seized in this raid?
I've been briefed a couple of times on this, but what I can tell you specifically is what I hope we're able to find out of this when we go through the laptops, when our analysis is done of the computers and the cell phones. There was money flowing into ISIS from several different families or tribes. It is good to find out which outside players, outside actors are helping to support ISIS so that we can cut that off in country. We can find now maybe who is dealing with ISIS, right? With the oil that they're exporting for cash, we can take action on that. It's possible now on the human trafficking, because they take these young Yazidi girls as prisoners and sell them in human trafficking, and Christian girls as slaves, sex slaves. It's possible to break up some of those rings. So the importance here of getting basically the emir of oil and gas, as they called him, but also the emir of human trafficking, is that we can send a message, but also break up those rings and help prevent ISIS from having that hard currency that it needs to operate.
Mr. Chairman, one final question real quick. There have been some talk that, especially when it comes to the wife who's being interrogated, that they might have some information about, some knowledge about the American hostages that were held by ISIS. Obviously you cannot, and we appreciate you can't get into some of the confidential information that you've received, but are you confident that she has been helpful in providing some intelligence on that front?
What we also suspect is that her husband, and we suspect that she was pretty high up in the involvement in ISIS, her husband was cognizant, because he ran hostage operations, of the situation faced by Kayla Mueller, as you know, the humanitarian, the young woman who was slaughtered by ISIS, along with two of our journalists there, Sotloff and Foley. The fact that those three were killed, and this commander in ISIS presumably had a hand in it since he ran hostage operations, is another reason why eliminating him from the battlefield is important, and access to his wife, who was involved in ISIS, gives us the ability potentially to get some more information.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman Ed Royce, thanks so much for being with us. We do appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John.